often people will keep their anomalous experiences to themselves. In other words, by definition, these experiences are not going to be very welcome. In my Harvard encounter, the chairman of the committee said, with a lot of anxiety in his voice, if what you've been writing about is true, that's a terrible threat to the laws of science as we know them, as if that was a bad thing. Worldviews are fundamental to who we are. They hold the psyche together. They make us feel part of the groups that share that worldview, and we hold on to them. We'll give our lives for, we'll fight wars for, we'll do anything to preserve a worldview. As indicated, people want to know that they know what's real.
Well, thank you for joining me today. It's great to see you in person.
Good to see you as well in person. First time, huh?
Yes, first time. Yes.
And impromptu.
Yes, and impromptu. Yeah, you were keeping Boise, and it was just really awesome to see you in person. It was fantastic to have you on the show again. A few months ago. But yeah, for everyone who's new doesn't know who you are, can you give a little introduction for yourself?
Yes, thank you for asking. My name is Marina Alexandrovna Smirnova, and professionally, I contribute at Saybrook University. I'm an award-winning faculty at Saybrook, teaching humanistic and also transpersonal psychology. And outside of the halls of academia, I support individuals who are seeking to integrate their evocative experiences. Sometimes they're referred to as extreme experiences. So towards wholeness and towards a fuller sense of identity and towards vibrant longevity as well. My interests are many, but through and through they are definitely transpersonal.
Well, thank you for explaining yourself.
Sure.
And for a lot of people that watch the show, we have various amounts of people that have strange experiences, and this seems to be part of the human experience. So
Yes, indeed, it is, and it is a continuum. So anything that one of us can experience, that means chances are many of us can have access to those experiences directly and indirectly, and this is valuable.
Yeah. And have you had any experiences yourself, not to go into too much detail, but is there anything that maybe that stands out to you that perhaps a lot of people have had happen to them?
Yes, I don't know how many, a lot or not, but definitely it started for me in childhood, early on. I was born on Sakhalin Island, and I had a very deeply transpersonal moment, having no language for it, of course, for decades. Only decades later, I had that language. But that moment was where I was outside in a kind of a garden that was a part of daycare. And a friend of mine, a girl, and I were sitting outside. And the sun was shining just so that kind of sweet beam of light, if you will, just hit me just so gently so. And all of a sudden I was there and I was lost. And I was in two worlds, as I would can describe it now. And the experience was so mesmerizing and so nuanced and beyond words. And all of a sudden I understood that there's so much more, and also that I am so much more. And of course, the experience was continued. When we moved to Belarus, after I finished second grade, my mom decided she was done with the forces of nature. She really wanted to be on the mainland. Yes, and we moved to Belarus from very far east of then former Soviet Union to very far west. Can you believe that's right? Right to Polish border, close to Polish border, exactly. 30 minutes away from Polish border we lived. And so there two experiences continued. I had an instance where I feel that I was really spared physically. There was a road instance where I don't know how I did not get hurt, and I do know how I did not get hurt. I didn't have a single scratch on me. I was in 3rd grade, and I understood that there are forces in this universe that vow to protect us. So I feel that I have experienced that divine protection, that transpersonal, beyond words, beyond comprehension at that time. And it was so much so that I couldn't speak about this for a very long time to anyone at all. It was so deeply private and intimate. And even as a 3rd grader, I knew it. So I never told my parents. And only later on, it's kind of, oh, okay, that's not going to happen. And of course, the veil was thin for me all the time. And especially in elementary school, so much so that I was like, okay, enough, I just don't want to see it anymore. I don't want to see this. And the veil closed,
Right.
It's very gentle.
Right. It
For
seems to
me.
respond. Yeah.
Exactly. I just, as a child, it was a little too much. And for me, and the veil gently closed. And then there came a point in time for me where I asked the veil to be reopened. But that was many years in between and many adventures, worldly adventures in between. So one of the interesting nuances, how, we're decades forward, right? How actually Dr. John Edward Mack came into my field of awareness was that even though I was aware of his work and I had bookmarked his work years ago, and he was on my radar, so to speak, I never allowed myself to come closer and to really take a deep dive into his work until such a time that I felt a personal spiritual connection with him. And he was already in the spirit, of course, because he has transitioned in September 27th, 2024 in the US day, but in England it was 28th of September because of the time difference. Early morning he transitioned. So until I felt that connection, and that's another prompting, I didn't feel that I was ready to dive in. And once I was diving in, once I was immersing myself really in his work, I understood how many more instances going back that I have dismissed or seemingly dismissed or did not give credit to that amount to a larger picture.
Do you feel like that would have been lost on you if you didn't tap into when it happened?
Yes, exactly. And it also would have taken me a whole lot longer to discern on my own without Dr. John Edward Mack's help through his work, right? What was going on and how we can look at dreams, dreamlike experiences, visions, and how even simple symptoms such as like childhood nosebleeds. Oh, what may this be all about, right? And so on, how they can help us to actually see, what elements resonate, how did they resonate? And then, of course, after being over 20 years in Michigan, without planning to move directly to Sedona, I had other plans for another state. I ended up in Sedona, and then I realized, that was too divinely guided, transpersonally guided, and in such a way that's undeniably connected to the transpersonal realm, undeniably connected to the transpersonal weave of my life, into the field of experiencing and being an experiencer. And I say in a larger sense, right? More than simply encounter experiences, right? And this is part of what we now understand as exceptional human experiences. And we can think of many classes in that group, if you will, of transpersonal weave. But for instance, we have psychic experiences, which can be looked at, and quite often is looked at as a class. We can have peak experiences, mystical experiences. We certainly have encounter experiences, right, which is a very important category. This is where John Edward Mack really made a tremendously valuable contribution.
Yes, he did.
And then we have death related, we have optimal performance experiences, right? We have spontaneous healing and so on. And the list goes on. So yes, I really truly believe that many of us, and I mean human beings, generally speaking, are super experiencers. That means we have innumerable experiences that belong to far more than one category, even from the ones that I mentioned. It is just simply that we're not really aware that that counts.
Right.
But when we are aware that that counts, we're like, oh my goodness, I have experienced synchronicities, I have experienced a vision, I have experienced a dream where a departed one came through and delivered the message, I have experienced this and this and that, I have experienced an encounter, close encounter or otherwise with what we can now call, intelligence beyond the human realm, right? So what have you. And we can dismiss them, and quite often we do. Putting all of those experiences into anomalous category.
Right.
But when they accumulate and we can no longer ignore them, we really shift into exceptional experiences kind of domain. And we can be there for quite some time. But with the support of others, like-minded individuals, when we begin to integrate and more fully and embodied, which is very important, if you ask me, our learning, our experiences, then we really move towards being in the field of exceptional human experiences. So, and experiencers. Yes, and again, it's a larger domain, well beyond the encounter experiences, but including them. So I really appreciate that expansion of the term experiencers beyond the encounter experiences class. And I really feel that this is a really relatable way of holding it, and also invites and holds all of the humanity.
Yeah. And there's honoring in it instead of rejecting a framework of an experience of the greater reality that person is having, where and not fitting into the mold of society that we've come to know and for our whole lives. That was one thing that when I came across John Mack, I was so amazed by was obviously his knowing all he knew and having his experience of working with plenty of people or through their trauma, their experiences and everything like that, but was his kindness and his love for people. That's something that really stood out for me when I remember watching the footage where he's interacting with the children in the 1997 Zimbabwe incident.
Yes, Zimbabwe.
Yeah,
That's right. Aerial school.
How did this idea come to you when you had this experience?
I just felt all horrible inside.
You felt horrible. At what point did you feel that? When you saw the craft, or when you got home at night? Or
When I got home,
you had that horrible feeling when you got home?
Yes.
And say more about that horrible feeling, Lisa. What was it like?
it was like in the world, all the trees will just go down and there will be no air and people will be dying.
And those thoughts came to you. Had you had those thoughts before this experience?
No.
No. And how did those thoughts come to you? Did they come to you from the craft or from
From the man.
the man? And did the man say those things to you? How did he get that across to you?
Well, he never said anything. It's just that the face is the eyes.
What was the sense you got from those eyes?
He was interested.
And you can see it on the children's face. You can see that. You can see that they felt safe with him. And I think that communicates a lot for the type of man that he was. One quote I do have from John Mack, and this actually, we played this near part one of the interview we did, but he said, "I've learned that changing worldviews requires a lot more than data. An ideology, when deeply ingrained, people don't know it's an ideology, they think it's the truth." And I think it's such a strong, poignant statement, because that's very much what we're fighting against in the regard of overall public perception of these extra ordinary experiences that people have, that we all have. And this is what John Mack was trying to, he didn't, I don't want to say fight against, but he was trying to be patient enough to help people understand that this is a greater reality that we have to take in, we have to accept, so that we can better understand, not just experiencers, but all of humanity, what we're encountering in our day-to-day, or in our sleep, or other forms of different expansive states.
Yes, and thank you so much for attending to this and for acknowledging the kindness of Dr. John Edward Mack. And we're not alone to see that kindness. People who knew him directly really understood and spoke to his thoughtfulness and incredible empathy and compassion and unparalleled intellectual acumen and gifts, yes. And that combination is quite rare. To have that approach to humanity while being so gifted and so talented and so accomplished as Dr. John Edward Mack was, it's rare. And as many know, that he was at Harvard. He was one of the key people in the psychiatry department. In fact, so much so that he chaired that department for a long time, since the 70s. And until his untimely transition on September 27th, 2004, he has changed many lives. And we know that on the one side, one of his impacts, and this is something that you also are so deeply interested in, and I honor that, impacts of John Edward Mack upon our lives. On the one hand, we have his tremendous academic impact, specifically on academic freedom, to study what we must, what we're called to, no matter how far-fetched that is. This kind of studies are leading edges that need to be engaged in order for us to advance. Yes. And
in the academic part, it needs to be engaged in that field, so for us to move the conversation forward across the board.
It's a requirement.
Yes.
It's a requirement, yes, and it is a difficult feat, right? I am an academia, and I honor.
And I applaud you for the work that you do and stuff in your field.
Yeah, thank you so much, and I'm not alone. There are many others who have advanced the field through taking professional risks beyond belief. Yes. And I think that quite often when people think of academia, they forget that academia is carrying the DNA of risk takers on behalf of humanity, to advocate for humanity. And Dr. John Edward Mack was a living example of that, of a high-level academic with a very well-established reputation. Pulitzer Prize winner for his 1976 book. Yes, it was a biography of Lawrence, and on one hand, that, right, academic impact, going back to the impact. And on the other hand, it is impact on what we know as human beings, of who we are in terms of our identities. And he has demonstrated, following data, following what his clients, yes, and experiencers whom he's assisted shared with him. Really, he showed us how our limited sense of identity that everyday life almost imposes upon us is far from accurate and far from comprehensive, far from complete. We're so much more.
Again, I'd like to stress that much of this really has to do with kind of different experiences with the experiencers. I know that many of this kind of cold indifference that Bud describes, where we're just kind of laboratory animals, that's there's no question. And yet, at the same time, I've had very discriminating people who describe actual evolving, deep, profound, loving bonds between the humans and these beings that last over time, that some experiences describe as many times more powerful than anything they can feel on Earth. They have, someone will describe a mate that is occurring in this other reality. And again, in my experience, this showing, for example, of apocalyptic scenes of devastation of the environment, of the earth, of the pollution, is not simply to test our reactions, but is a kind of desperate effort to communicate something about us to ourselves. It is not apparently the way the universe works that we're going to be saved, as people say, well, why don't they save us if they can see all that? Well, it doesn't work like that. It works to open up our consciousness in some way to what's going on.
So that identity, right, he really illustrated for us to look differently. And then, yet on the other hand, he was advocating for a science of the divine, a sacred science, and most importantly, a science of human experiences that would be a reliable science that could study human experiences of various various kinds, right? It's a continuum without having to be limited to the scientific paradigm that is not well equipped to tend to various, quite often puzzling and quite frankly paradoxical angles and nature and cultures and layers. So there's so much more that we could speak about as it honors Dr. John Edward Mack's legacy as not only academic but also as a upstanding professional in the mental health field who put his clients' well-being before his own benefit, before his own reputation, before the risks of investigations that he did encountered Harvard, a 15-month investigation that concluded that he is free to study on the topics that he chooses to without any constraints and must-haves ought to in terms of the topics. Yes, which itself is a huge breakthrough. Yes, so we owe, as far as I'm concerned, in academia a debt of gratitude, and I tip my hat to you, Dr. John Edward Mack, in the spirit, for you're with us in one way or another, encouraging, holding our hands, sometimes in humorous ways. I attest.
Yeah, it's
We thank you.
He definitely challenged the Western notion of, whatever people are having these strange interactions with, that they're somehow not part of objective reality. John Mack, he believed in alien abduction experiences may be part of a larger visionary tradition because he recognized striking parallels between reports of alien encounters and the visionary experiences found in many pre-industrial indigenous cultures.
Yes.
He also noted through history, societies have described transformative encounters, such as vision quests among Native Americans, that they were integrated into cultural understanding as meaningful spiritual events rather than dismissed as pathology or mental illness. And that's something that he really pushed hard for, of helping us understand that this genuinely is greater reality and experiences that were happening. I often think being an American myself and from the West, right? That materialism is pervasive through everything. That thinking of, that somehow, oh, well, I had this dream that actually was succinct with things months later. You know what? Actually, I just probably ate something bad. Just shrug it off.
Dismissive, yes. Dismissive, yes. And thank you for speaking about this too. And we're all part of that, right? How many I myself hastily dismissed one thing or another.
As an experiencer, I do.
Yeah.
I genuinely do.
Yeah.
I think we all do. It's something that I think that even as experiencers, we still are coming to grips with, integrating those parts.
Absolutely, and it's a process.
Right.
We'll always continue to, yes, provided we gather that measure of willingness to do so. And yes, Dr. John Edward Mack acknowledged that he is among those who are challenging the well-established consensual reality paradigm that is crumbling.
Yes.
And continues to crumble, yes. And he was in the company of many others who were actually, through their work, following data, following the reports of their clients and their individuals with whom they worked and facilitated their development. So really, he was, for instance, connected closely to Dr. Stanislav Grof, who is one of the founders of what we now understand to be transpersonal psychology, who has worked with expanded states of consciousness for decades. First coming into the U.S. in the late 60s, 1960s, on Hopkins University grant to do highly protocoled LSD studies, yes. And once that came to a stop, we understand why. Then he had to develop another way without any substances whatsoever, without any medicine, indigenous medicine or otherwise, but actually building up on indigenous traditions, isolating breath, evocative music, special support, set and setting, to allow the psyche to speak, to open up again that portal to understanding we're so much more. And to trusting the psyche as a healer, and to trusting experiences that are evocative quite often can be experienced as traumatic.
Yeah.
And by the way, Dr. John Edward Mack also noted that many experiencers, yes, had that brush with traumatic elements of their experiences, yes, and nevertheless, how it all is transformative, as you well know, and you pointed out that to me earlier, how all of this is transformative in nature, because in essence, while we work through the traumatic imprints of the present, past, and sometimes in the future, because we already know that time, is not a linear thing, yes, it is non-linear.
Yes.
And as we work through that, there are grains of wisdom that we discover, that we contemplate, that we work with, we struggle with, wrestle with, and make ours. In essence, we say, yes, I have lived through something that is beyond words, beyond my wildest imagination. And I don't even know how to speak to others about this. However, I hold it sacred in my heart and in my being. And I am willing to embody that knowing, that experience in all the ways that serves me and the humanity at large, but also the cosmic community. Let's face it. Yes, let's face it. Because deep inside we know, could it be that we're not alone, even if we don't acknowledge any association with experiences that could be considered as extreme? Yes, nevertheless, they are human experiences. And they are quite often something that really evolves towards and ends up into the group of exceptional human experiences, which is a very large group. And I believe that every human being really experiences something from that domain.
First, honor the anomalous. Now, you all do that, but enable people who've had anomalous experiences to feel that they are part of the culture, that they are not marginalized, that these experiences are sacred, and that they're not pathological. Now, you can't court a near-death experience, and you can't court, I suppose, a UFO encounter. I guess some people seem to be able to do that, but most of the time we have to court the anomalous through our open-heartedness, our willingness to listen, our availability to hear the extraordinary, to be open to it in our own lives, so listen to our dreams.
Do you think that, we're talking about trauma, talking about people have gone through with their experiences, very hard experience, hard trauma, hard memories, sometimes physical. How do you see that being transformative? Because that is a big, that tends to be a really delicate topic in the experience.
It definitely is.
And very understandable the reasons why. You know, I know from my own experiences, if the traumatic elements hadn't happened, I wouldn't have gotten to where I am and matured to where I am in those experiences itself. So, what are your thoughts on that? How do you view it?
Yes, thank you for acknowledging the sensitive and nuanced nature of experiences that are could be described as traumatic.
And I want to add this one more thing.
Oh, sure.
For example, like the researcher David Jacobs.
Yes, historian.
Yes. He was well known for his research into experiencers, and it seemed like he late in his later years took a more negative approach to the phenomenon, and people's abduction cases, contactees, even people interacting with hybrids that he talked about in his books. And he eventually got to a point where he viewed it as a negative. I just kind of wanted to bring that up because it seems to be when there can be researchers that either go in kind of a few different camps, and there's some that eventually go into a negative camp of viewing everything as negative. And I often wonder, why is that just their perspective? Maybe they've not had an encounter personally to make them understand the layers of nuance, but I don't know. Like I felt like I guess what I'm trying to get at is like he seemed to stick out. John Mack seemed to stick out in that way of really wanting to go deeper than just looking at the surface.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. And not settling just for negative, right? Or just for that.
Right.
Or just for positive. Do you know that he just holds it differently?
Yeah. And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you. And I like how you're bringing here, one element, thread of, traumatic experiences. Another one is going far into the negative view, right? As an example, from a historian by training,
right.
A high-level training, PhD level training. Yes, here I really believe that the question why and how it will work with this. Well, there's a reason why we need the support of others in working with experiences that are very challenging for the psyche. And I even propose for us to consider making sure that others who we bring into the inner circle, into our inner lives, right? Because it's very powerful for inner life. Are those who are not only properly trained in Western sense and licensed perhaps even in their fields, right, and properly trained, but also who have a very good transpersonal foundation. And by transpersonal, I simply mean tradition that goes and acknowledges the spiritual domain of our lives, that acknowledges the wisdom traditions of the world, acknowledges the parapsychological aspects that quite often are neglected in the mainstream, and really builds upon and honors the exceptional human experiences. When we bring this together, and this is what Dr. John Edward Mack brings to us. He's this pillar of support. And I speak to him in the present, right? He is a pillar of support who has brought to us both the highly regarded standing in academia, the highly regarded psychiatric practice, and also that very deeply rooted, not only academically, not only spiritual, but also experientially, transpersonal tradition. When we speak about Jacobs, for instance, with all respect, given his training in history and solid training, question is, was he really equipped fully to hold judgments on the developments of the human psyche, having not been really part of this lineage and tradition of psychological tending, psychospiritual tending, transpersonal tending to the psyche? So we quite often want to ask, are we steeped enough in the layers of knowledge of the psyche to jump to conclusions? So, and again, I say this with respect because we're all subject to sometimes jumping to conclusions, are we not? Yes, and this is what I believe that Dr. John Edward Mack and Dr. Stanislav Grof and others offer us, and including actually Keith Thompson, with his recent book that was offered to us in August of last year, 2024. The book is called The UFO Phenomenon. Him including, because he has offered us in 1991 Angels and Aliens. Oh yeah. Yes.
Okay, sorry. Repeat that just so.
Oh sure.
Yeah.
Sure, including Keith Thompson. Yes, who actually in 1991 offered us the book Angels and Aliens, and that book had a sequel. I call it a sequel, which is the UFO phenomenon, right? Paradox, actually, the UFO paradox. That's what it's called. And that book was offered to us in August of '94. So we're speaking about Dr. Mack, Dr. Grof, Keith Thompson, and many others who offer us multi-dimensional perspective without giving that clean-cut answers. Honoring what is, honoring what accounts of the experiencers give us, honoring the various paradigms, but also bringing in and clear understanding that the scientific model that we have established long ago is not equipped to account for and to properly study the human experience, the human experience, specifically when it tips into the exceptional category, right? Exceptional human experience. And so with this, again, each of us has a different threshold for understanding what is experienced as traumatic. And those individual differences need to be accounted for. And each of us knows when we do need support of others. And it is imperative that we find that support. Perhaps it's in a group setting, perhaps it's even a book club group, yes, on specifically transpersonal topics, let's say, or humanistic topics, yes. Maybe it is a conference, maybe it's a gathering, maybe it's a conversation with a friend. Maybe just finding and continue find again our own transpersonal communities of unique weaves where we feel heard and understood. But it also includes seeking out, again, others who are professionally positioned to help us with navigating the personal and the transpersonal ordeal that experiences bring to us by day and by night. We can have what we experience as dreams that could be so powerful and adjuvant traumatic. Sometimes it's like flat out traumatic that it takes us days, sometimes weeks, sometimes months to come to term. And this is where a skilled other who's transpersonally informed can come into the picture and help us with integration of those experiences. So importantly, we just need to remember that the times are changing. What used to be a diagnosable condition then quite often is looked differently at now. We still have a way to go, but in the domain of honoring the diversity of transpersonal experiences of spiritual practices, we're inching along, which is very, very helpful. And I am indebted personally and professionally and transpersonally to Dr. John Edward Mack and Dr. Stanislav Grof, with whom I studied in my time through Grof holotropic training in transpersonal psychology, and certainly to others who continue to bring to us the leading edges of what it means to be human and what it means to remember that chances are we are part of cosmic community. And cosmic communities, could it be that even through that possibility alone, we hold an opportunity to hold a cosmic identity? Could that be?
I think, yeah, it could very much well be as the full reality of the situation. Also can, it could be in altered states or other realities that we have this identity, and as we move forward with understanding the phenomenon and our interactions with it, you say it's a human experience innately. We have to have everything on the table as we walk that along. And I think again, John Mack did a really good job of finding that balance, because he didn't reject an experience's dream.
No, exactly.
He didn't reject because it was too far out that they got taken to an altered reality, other things like that. These are all things that were deeply impactful for them. As you read through abductions, they have many examples in there of people having very traumatic experiences, being able to come to John Mack, nobody else is helping me. I need somebody to listen.
He
to
did help them,
yes.
Because he decided to support.
Yes, and he decided to listen. He decided to be there for them.
Yeah.
And then seeing them walk that out through those chapters, I think everyone, there might have been one contactee in there that was still struggling through stuff, but they all seem to go through this phase of growth, and where they were able to realize that, this experience was I innately saw as traumatic or negative. Actually, this was really important for my growth.
Exactly.
And having that, perspective and wisdom eventually in order to get there, they had to work through that trauma. They had to have somebody listening to them.
Yes.
And so what do you feel, how do you feel John Mack has affected us in the world, in culture, specifically Western culture?
Western, yes, many ways, Daniel, many ways. I'm sure that some of them we're not even aware of. Certainly, one way, as I mentioned, is his academic courage and courage as a clinician to put his experiences, clients first, and actually listen, and instead of jumping to diagnostics beforehand or shying away from even supporting individuals with such earth-shaking experiences. He decided to help them.
You work with the mystery, you have them sort of put the nose of the prow of the self into the phenomenon, that it does transform, that it does become more spiritual, that growth does occur. And sometimes there can be this in not just this sort of transient sense of loving connection that is manipulated, but some deepening bond that lasts throughout this relationship across these dimensions, and that this is a very deep, powerful phenomenon. Why is there so much resistance to accepting, or at least realizing what's going on?
And for many, he became a lifeline. We're talking about well over 200 individuals of various ages, including children, right, including mature adults. So academically speaking, and speaking from clinical venue, he has broadened our perspective by shattering our understanding of reality. In fact, he challenged, not simply intellectually, but experientially challenged our understanding of reality, the nature of reality.
Maybe other realities that this Grand Canyon we've created between the so-called other realms, the fourth dimension, the subtle realm, the implicate order, that world is not forever separate from our world. That there are people that, I'm not saying that it's separate for all of us, but for what we've been using this term mainstream. In the mainstream reality, that world is the world of the subjective, it's the world of myth, it's the world of religion, but it doesn't show up. It isn't supposed to cross over and manifest physically in our world. And when it does do so, then the person who says it's physical will say, well, the evidence isn't good enough, or it isn't real. That barrier, those domains are supposed to be separate. And I guess one of the things I'd like to have this evening create for us is that those are not separate domains, that there is interchange, that it can show up physically. Bud says, well, it's how much it takes to convince somebody. I don't think the physical evidence by itself is going to give us, it's not going to give us a smoking gun. It's inviting us to stretch to reach it. I sometimes call this an outreach program from the cosmos to the spiritually impaired.
Challenged what we believe to be so, not because he just deducted it to be so, right? But he actually utilized the accounts, experiential accounts of many individuals, well over 200, to understand that, there's a much more going on than we, right, as humanity, account for. But he was not alone, and he again had support of others, many others. And this is why it's important, every conversation, every moment of tuning in, every even question we pose to ourselves is important, because it's moment by moment that we begin to shift together into more expanded understanding of who we are, what our reality holds, and how do we approach studying, understanding, and integrating experiences that we as humans share. So here's academic and clinical side. Here is another side of him coming in and actually risking embodying what he has learned. To the best of our knowledge, he never claimed that he had an experience as an encounter with UFO, UAP, as we call now, yes, or extraterrestrial life or non-human intelligence. He never claimed that. Nevertheless, he embodied that knowing what his clients imparted to him, yes? And I think this is huge, that he was willing to augment his own presence, knowing that even though, in a sense, he was deprived of such a instance, right, as far as he knew, right, as far as we know, but he has trusted his human fellow beings in delivering the essence of their experiences. And then, of course, so aside from academic, clinical, and here's this embodiment, he's done something tremendously valuable, because he began to bridge different classes of exceptional human experiences. For example, he invested heavily into what we know is the encounter class, right? Encounter with various intelligences, archetypal beings, mythical figures, and the list goes on. But then he also noted that a number of his clients spontaneously went into recall of their what we understand to be past or previous life experiences. Yes, spontaneously. And so he thought, okay, when the psyche opens in a proper setting with proper support, this is where support is so important, professional support, proper support, we gain not only a clarity in recollection of something that perhaps the topic was to experience, an instance of encounter, right, with UFO, UAP, more than human intelligence or other than human, right? And then all of a sudden other doors open up. So that also shows that when we work with an expanded state of consciousness, again, in proper support setting, all of a sudden, as he noted, other flows come in. And this is how, towards the end of his life, for a number of years, at the end of his life, Dr. John Edward Mack was actually researching actively the continuation of consciousness past physical death as we understand it. And that would be another class. That would be, death related, which includes near-death experiences after death, but it goes further than that, yes, beyond that, absolutely. And so he was bridging encounter experiences with death-related, counts, and in such a beautiful way that he was again showing that consciousness is more than we understand through mainstream lenses. And in fact, towards the end of his life, he was working on so many projects. For instance, he was putting together an anthology of consciousness with another colleague. He was working on a book that he would call Elizabeth and Mark, right? It's a short title, and that would be about Elizabeth Targ and Mark Cummings. Once Elizabeth transitioned, people were receiving messages from her, including Mark, and so Dr. John Edward Mack was a witness to Dr. Elizabeth Targ's communication, right? Or we can say perhaps presence from the beyond, if you will. Use your own words. Yes, don't let the words stop you. That's important. That's another way how we make our experiences ours and how we allow the experiences that we would like to contemplate to enter our life. We just work with language. Language is important. And so by even writing, working on that book, Dr. John Edward Mack was not deprived of a sense of humor. He was saying like, oh yeah, not that only people know me now as the one who's working with, experiences and acknowledging the realities, their experiential realities of encounters with UFO and extraterrestrials. But now look at me, now they'll say now he's talking to the dead, So it's very interesting how he had so much humility deep down and how it percolated in instances where it was so welcome and so needed. So his impact is also in setting aside the high titles, the high achievement, the Harvard recognition, the Pulitzer Prize achievement, yes, and shining through as a human being, as a mere human being, and not only mere human being.
I have a quote.
Oh, there you have it. Oh, there you have it.
I was waiting for you to land on it. I was like, all right. So this is actually from an interview he did with TBS. So he said, sometimes along the way you will go deeper and deeper into a person's consciousness, into their experience, when they will discover what is called a dual identity. Mm-hmm. In other words, they are both human in one dimension, and they are also are themselves have an alien identity. that they are particularly in this reproductive hybrid program, as they were known all apart together, and that they may in fact even experience themselves as aliens. One of the men in my book, and I believe this is chapter 5, this is the one I mentioned earlier before we
in
recorded.
the abduction.
Yeah, says there was an active participant in taking a woman from Texas up to the ship and being an active reproductive function as an alien being, and he felt he was himself an alien. And often the abductees will feel that is their job developmentally to integrate these two dimensions into two aspects of themselves, the human and the alien, and that the alien dimension is part of ourselves, our souls, if you will, even, in which we are or have been cut off over the centuries of human beings living on this earth in this density embodied form. And this is from chapter 5. That was the individual he was talking about, but coming across that notion of the dual soul, which I think is super fascinating. And we've had many contactees on our show that have talked about it, and I would relate to it as well. But yeah, there seems to be this element of that we're trying to integrate into ourselves. Now, whether they're an external entities trying to come here and integrate into human society, if it's more of a physical, like literally dimensions like merging or whatnot, or if it's more of a metaphysical, or more of us expanding our awareness consciously as a species to then incorporate these other realities. I think people can pick and choose, but it is happening. There is this movement of evolution of our consciousness. I often wonder with, his impact on how we view the phenomenon and just, challenging the Western notion. There has genuinely been a disconnect. People have our experiences, but then we write them off at the end of the day. And we are doing such an injustice for that. And I think it's always important as we walk and do our normal day to day to try to embody a little bit of what he was doing or what he was trying to impart to us.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for again coming back to this, circling back to this invitation, for us to be more cognizant and more even tender to what we experience without
and patient with our experiences too.
Exactly, patient, and also setting aside the cynical elements that are so readily at hand, because the mystery is afoot, and that's one of other impacts from my perspective that Dr. John Edward Mack offered us, that he honored the mystery, he honored the divine, he honored the sacred, and so much so that he would even say that all of this, this abduction phenomenon and UFO encounters, they are more or less outreach program to the spiritual and consciously impaired. And this is a paraphrase of his message, right? From several different sources. Think about this, an outreach program, cosmic outreach program to the spiritual and consciously, impaired. Yeah. Yeah. So
he mentioned that too. One of his, I'll clip it too. In this, his inner. He had a one-time interaction with Terrence McKenna. Do you remember watching that video?
No, I don't. Tell us about it.
Terrence McKenna was at a conference, and he came up to him with a microphone and was just like, "Hey, John Mack, I listened to your thing. I want to talk to you about your research." And so they started going back and forth.
And do you have an interpretation of what that distinction implies? Is it apocalyptic? Is it technological? What is it?
If you could think of the divine, or if you can think of the the world of both spirit with form and spirit without form, or the anima mundi, whatever your language for it, the Great Spirit, the Holy Spirit, whatever it is, we have lost contact with it. It signals us we don't listen. There are various ways that certain people have revelations and experiences. Occasionally, the more advanced spiritual people among us are reconnecting with the spirit. But for most of us, the only language that we know now is the language of the material world. So it's as if the divinities say, okay, if that's all you understand, I'll give it to you in the material world. I'll give you physical manipulations, I'll give you reproductive connection, I'll give you cuts, scars, scoop marks, I'll give you burned earth where the UFOs land, and I'll give you an experience which is consistent among various people, which empirically everybody agrees. There are photographs of UFOs. It's showing up in the physical world. It may not be of the physical world as we know it, but it communicates in the physical world. And when something shows up in the physical world that belongs in the spirit world, that gets the stiff-necked materialists very excited. Now, they want physical proof, just like in empirical science, because all other faculties of knowledge have been atrophied. But this gets their attention because it shows up in the language we understand, which is the physical language.
You link it to the anima mundi, then do you think of it as an ecological danger signal, that it's a message from an Earth intelligence, perhaps the Earth
There are
intelligence?
two pieces of evidence that suggest that that's true. One is that the abductees themselves on the ships receive intense messages about ecological destruction, annihilation of whole forest systems, pollution of the water system, visions of the planet dying, and they see that on television-like screens. They get it through telepathic communication, and these are not environmentalists, these people. They are people who are very simple, ordinary people, unremarkable, except that they are getting this extraordinary information. And they actually become intensely, passionately concerned about the Earth and what's happening to the Earth, and their children do, because their children may be abducted as well. So that's one piece of information. The other piece of information is they experience themselves as not in control, being taken against their wills, being treated the way we treat animals, tagged with implants, having physical, emotional experiences in which they're utterly terrified and without being able to control what's going on. And that, for them, brings home how we treat other creatures on the planet, our kind of, as was discussed at this conference in Prague by Ralph Metzner, this kind of humanistic arrogance, as if the only creatures that were really important on the planet were ourselves, and we were superior in some way to all of the life forms. This phenomenon shows us that we are being treated the way we treat animals, as if they existed only for our pleasure. And they totally transform how they treat animals, how they treat the earth, how they relate to the environment around them.
I remember listening to that video. He's so on point for that perspective, because it really does. I genuinely felt in my own encounters with beings that there's something tied to the earth in that regard, but also it's other at the same time. It's like a blend between the two.
Of course.
And I think he was definitely on point with that. And, just how, and I know Whitley Strieber's talked about this as well, as like being more like fish taken out of a river. And they're like, oh my God. Like,
and that's a great metaphor, by the way.
Yeah,
and then the fish is trying to tell other fish, and they're thinking,
There's
like, okay,
people out there.
where's your straitjacket?
Right.
It's just...
Yeah, and also, it's a great metaphor as well of perceiving if these are non-human intelligences that are outside of time and space, then yes, they are very much fishermen watching us swim in the river. They plop us out. We don't understand what the experience is. It's very visceral. And it is such a different different reality, and so it doesn't surprise me at all when people talk about having experiences. Well, I had this experience when I was a kid, and this later, and then actually, I heard I had this encounter, which then was reference to something in the future that happened to me, and they eventually come across it, right? And you have this weird time thing where these beings are able to slip into our instances almost, and like give a little nugget of information, and then pop back out, and then you're like, this is crazy. The
And we get to
synchronicity is
connect.
wild.
Exactly.
Right.
We get to connect.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's just walking forward of our understanding of how reality works, and they seem to work in this way. And it's very trickstery coded as well.
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. Yes, the trickster is a food, archetypally
100%.
speaking. Yes.
Very much embedded into the phenomenon.
Yeah.
And this is another part that, I will touch briefly.
Just go for it.
Grant Cameron, he did a video recently. Grant, I want you on the show. Please respond to my messages. Love you. Okay. But he talked about the phenomenon is you have these people with Skywatcher or other things, they're trying to call these down, and they're like, oh, this is brand new, these people with money, they're like, oh, we're going to get what we need from the phenomenon, so to speak, and they're like, it doesn't work like that. It's going to be dancing around you as soon as you think you figured it out.
Yes, and thank you. And that's what also Keith Thompson so skillfully pointed out in both of his books. The first one in 1991, and the second one in 2004. First one is the angels and aliens, and the second one is the UFO paradox, right? He pointed out this elusive nature of the whole unfolding, that the moment we want to pin something down, it shifts and pivots. Yes, absolutely. And he, Keith Thompson gives a wonderful connection to, again, mythological wealth of humanity and how we can view this, and that trickster, that shape-shifting quality. Absolutely. And it's this divine sense of humor.
Yes.
So if we want to be so very literal and so very sure of ourselves.
And very serious.
Yes. And Keith Thompson himself actually has, if you ask me, he is a super experiencer, among many others, who have really dived into this death-related class of the exceptional human experiences through his own life experiences, how he was able to really take poignant parts of his life, such as his sixth grade report on a UFO occurrence in Michigan, and how that little report in a classroom, even though everyone chuckled and was making jokes at first, his peers, the teacher really acknowledged at that time Keith Thompson very keen approach to what can be looked at as journalism, right? And she was really instrumental in helping Keith to advance in his career as a journalist by simply being supportive. And so as we weave, this conversation, what would be helpful is just say, okay, how could people work with this? If we don't even understand someone else's sharing, instead of dismissing, denying, combating, questioning, simply being a supportive presence and allowing a container for an individual simply to be heard. It's huge, because those instances of kind support that reaches beyond our understanding, literally and metaphorically beyond our understanding, they are invaluable in helping us to recollect and reconcile and perhaps even link back to our sense of larger identity. Yes, identity is how that is. And thank you so much for sharing, because there's so much that you highlighted, that's so much value in terms of how we can view it, what is lighting up, yes, and a sense of humor is lighting up, and weekly Scriber, yes, and so I remember that metaphor. It's just chuckled myself, and so that also reminds me of a joke. And please understand that this is historically steep, so I will use your own lenses, right, to offer a contemporary language to it, but I would like to offer it again in a historical perspective, as it was offered to me. Stan Grove was sharing this back in the day in one of the holotropic breathwork and transpersonal psychology modules for holotropic breathwork certification training 2-year program. So he offered something. He actually had a little cartoon on the slide, on a PowerPoint slide. And the joke was like, what is the difference between a mystic and a psychotic? And again, please use your lenses, right? We don't use this language anymore.
Right.
And according to that joke, what is the difference between the mystic and the psychotic? The answer is, the difference is that mystic knows whom not to talk to. So speaking of Whitley Scriber's fish, right, story, and speaking of our own reality shattering experiences, we need to trust our intuition to when, how much, in which instance, and at which extent we should or should not share our experiences with someone else. This is a very legitimate point of discernment, personal, professional, and transpersonal, because fallen on the unfertile ground, if you will, that such a sharing could potentially throw us back in our own development, personal and transpersonal, and in our own trust in our own experiences, because I have experiences myself. And in my case, in one of the instances, it threw me back about 5 years. And I already had transpersonal foundation by then.
Right.
And still, a single word, a single comment, a single scoffing, even attitude or sound or presence can communicate, cut it off. This is not good enough. We don't want to go there. Here you are again. And you could add your own kind of phrases, yes, because the language is so powerful. It's not only verbal, it's largely non-verbal by far.
Right.
Yes, so please, I would recommend to all of us experiencers to continue to make it a gentle invitation and gentle personal, transpersonal challenge to discern in each instance. Should we or should we not? Would it be a good idea? Or could we just offer a light perspective or a joke and kind of see where that goes? Because essentially we hold the power with whom we will share what we share. And Dr. John Edward Mack and others taught us. That's very empowering. That's another contribution. He empowered people he worked with. And he asks us to empower ourselves and each other. If you ask me, this is how I translate some of his teachings, yes. So could it be that it is an invitation for us here to make a point of contemplation together and to say, would I be willing to take on that heroic quest of discerning when and if I would like to share with someone, at which extent, under which circumstances, and how do I hold my experiences? Typically for me, I can speak from my own experience. If experience is very raw, and experience is yet to be, in my own sense internally, yet to be for me fully integrated, and I feel a higher sense of vulnerability, I know that I have to be very cautious when and how I share about this. However, if that experience is already steeped in layers and layers of conversation and integration, that I feel, in a sense of even in the embodied level, in the cellular level, I feel secure in no matter what anybody else says. I own this experience as sacred.
Yeah.
Then I'm free to share it, in ways and circumstances that I typically would not.
Right.
But that discernment, I think it's very essential for our own progress in transpersonal maturity, or towards transpersonal maturity. That's what I've discovered for myself. And I trust that even contemplating this brings us all closer in understanding and in support. And again, if in doubt, consider it a gift. If someone shares with you something otherworldly, something that in your worldview is entirely impossible, consider it a privilege that someone trusted enough, or even continues to trust enough to hold the conversation in person, virtually. Yes.
Yes.
And otherwise.
Yes.
And otherwise. Yeah.
That's a very kind way of putting that. Yeah. It's important for us to give ourselves grace for it and to work out of that intuitive space.
Intuitive space, I like that.
I think
like that, Danielle.
also, when you work out of that intuitive space, when you have those prerequisites of understanding that the person you're interacting with is, there might be synchronicities or other elements, that have layers where you're able to feel free to share that experience that you are feeling that you need to share. Often that is also important for that person.
Yes.
And whoever they might be talking to.
Yes.
This consciousness field is a spider web, and when we have other experiences, when we are sharing that information in the appropriate way, working out into space, it is very it changes others.
I really
It changes
like that.
other
Yes.
it changes not just the person, maybe, possibly, but also it affects the overall culture.
Yes.
And I think they understand this. This
Yes.
is why they make the contact, abduction, interaction with the phenomena, it's personal. It's often personal. I would say 99% of it tends to be a personal transformation somehow for that person, but not just a personal transformation, it's for others as well. I know that. I know that is part of their 5D chess in that way.
Thank you for sharing this. There is a joke again in the transpersonal field. And the joke is easier heard than integrated. I'm just
Oh, that's amazing. That's so good.
So the joke,
It's so true, though.
Yes. And now that you know it, the joke is, don't take things personally, take them transpersonally. And of course it feels deeply personal, of course. And then we're asked to go the extra mile after the extra mile and the extra mile.
Yes.
And say, could that be that I am a portal? I am, in indigenous sense, I will borrow this language, a kind of a hollow bone for the transcendent, for the divine, for the spirit, for the Holy Spirit, for the field of consciousness, for the cosmic, whatever you call it, energy. You come up with your own language, right? Don't let the language stop you.
Yeah.
Could it be that each of us is offering something to the conversation and we each support each other like a weave? Unless we take that risk when the risk is obviously, yes, a well discerned, yes, let's put it this way. Could it be that by taking that creative risk, discerned risk, and offering something or holding the space, we are putting a piece of a puzzle in place
Yes.
for the next step, right? And we may not even understand it. It's so valuable.
Also, your encounters and your experiences are unique to you
Yes.
for what you needed as well.
Yes.
And for me, and I want to funnel that back to John Mack, right? Who you talked about. At least publicly, he didn't really share a lot of his own personal experiences in that way. it's hard to believe because he comes. It feels like an experiencer.
I know, right?
He has that hair. You can smell it on. You can feel it off of somebody. So I don't know how true that is, but I think that John Mack got what he needed. We all the phenomenon it seems to be reactive to what we need, and I think certain people require a lot more of a wow factor than others might need more of a gentle experience or other little things that help lead them along for their own evolutionary progression.
Yes.
And John Mack really he took experiencers who were having these visual experiences, and he really brought that along with academic level, and he wanted to try to merge this science of the spirit, the science of the soul we've talked about. And I think for his own experiences, they were needed for what the field of consciousness, NHI, whichever you want to say. They understood the long-standing impact he would have with his works, with who he was working with his books, with his just personal impact on people.
Yes.
And so I think that another part is just being thankful for the experiences we do have and being able to share with each other.
Exactly.
And be able to blend all those pieces together for the moving the overall conversation forward. Because if John Mack didn't do all the stuff that he did, if he didn't talk with experiencers, be there for them, we wouldn't have. I feel like the field will be completely set back.
We would be definitely behind, if you will. Yes, and that is I very much appreciate how you're holding it and an acknowledgement of his work, and how it resonates with us now, right? You even ask me, hey, what would Dr. John Edward Mack be doing right now, if he were still in the physical, right?
Yeah.
And that is like a wonderful question. What would he be doing? Well, we know that towards the end of his life, he was already venturing outside of the contact, right? That cluster, if you will, that cluster of experiences under the umbrella of exceptional human experiences. Mm. And he was venturing into the, death-related. And I am sure that he would, if I were to use my embodied imagination, if he were with us in the physical right now, in the physical body, that is, I think he would show us this, human experience as this incredible jewel, if you will, with innumerable edges that shines ever so brightly, that there are so many ways to hold human experience, and there are so many ways to honor it in sacred ways. It is it's never lost on me that he would be one of many upstanding others who would inch forward and sometimes spring forward, right? Mm-hmm. And sprint forward toward acknowledging the fullness and the giftedness of who we are, even when we don't know it and refuse to know it. Mm. And stomp our feet like a 2-year-old and saying, no, don't take me there, don't ever talk to me about this again. I think we've all done something like this. Hey, or I don't want to ever talk about this, don't even bring this conversation to me, don't even go there. And yes, his spirit is, in my view, in my experience, is alive and well. And even, as I shared with you earlier before we started the recording, I had a very interesting dream, and just a long story short, I just feel his encouragement. It's like, because at times I say, like, who am I to talk about Dr. John Edward Mack? Who am I to talk about him? And the encouragement is in spiritual sense, in the sense of humor through dream and through visionary, really, experience. Spontaneous, really. Is just go for it. Go for it. Be yourself. Continue, continue, continue. Because if we were to stay safe, can speak for myself, if I am to stay safe, I'm stagnating. And by taking this risk right now, impromptu having this conversation that we never planned, really.
Yeah.
But this is how it turned out. We're saying yes to life as it is. We're saying yes to realities. We're saying yes to the opportunities, because someone in the audience, at least one of the viewers from our conversation today, can walk away and saying, you know what? Let me think about it. Maybe there is an experience that would serve me well to return to, and to say, hello, I'm here. Forgive me for dismissing you. My lovely experience, or maybe earth-shattering experience. Yes, but I invite you back. Teach me what you came to teach me. And when you mentioned earlier that we receive what we need in terms of experiences, in many ways, this is so, generally speaking, yes. And of course, there are so many nuances. That is so in other practices. For example, in holotropic breathwork or in growth breathwork, both terms are relevant and kind of go in a parallel way. It is well understood that when individuals are going into expanded states of consciousness, or you could think of in transpersonal state, right? And more specifically in what is called holotropic states, or states are designed, facilitated to allow a movement towards wholeness of our being, right, of our psyche, to integrating fully, even the sense of our different identities, right? That's an example, an instance of it. So when we are entering expanded states, let's say in holotropic breathwork or in growth breathwork, all of a sudden, there we are offered opportunities, to welcome what is arising spontaneously, because the premise for this work as one of transpersonal practices is that we trust that the inner intelligence, sometimes it's called the inner healer, the inner wise one, you create your own name for it, knows what it knows and knows what we're ready to process. And quite often in our transpersonal work, such as holotropic breathwork or growth breathwork, and other work, experiences are traumatic. But it is through revisiting them in a proper setting, and proper support, right? A lot of things need to be met, obviously, for this to happen. In working with those experiences and allowing ourselves to express them in a safe container, in embodied ways, and allow a process of preparation and experience and integration as a model, right? And it's obviously non-linear, it keeps going. We are honoring our beings much more than otherwise. And note, when we are actually trusting our own experiences, such as in meditation, holotropic breathwork, growth breathwork, indigenous ceremonies, and so on, we are saying, yes, I'm willing to meet my own depth. Yes, I'm willing to experience them, potentially, as uncomfortable, potentially as traumatic, because I know that I am ready for that experience, because otherwise my own psyche, embodied psyche, would not gift me with that treasure. It would not trust me with that treasure, right? And so could it be that when we welcome the experiences and welcome as they are by day, by night, right? Visions, dreams, lucid dreams, right? Dreams as if it was happening right here, right now. The different qualities, yes. And so on. Some of them, other experiences by day. Some of them are facilitated, such as in a group setting, otherwise mentored individually, right, in one-on-one work. And others are spontaneous. But could it be, if we hold them as gifts that are yet to be unwrapped and yet to be put to work, And as we are receiving proper support and welcome proper support, could that be that our journey transforms? One of the interesting dreams I had a long time ago, it had to be around 2011 or 12. I was there deep into my holotropic breathwork and transpersonal psychology training with Stan Grof in a group environment. I had a dream, and I had to be manla centered. So during one of the modules, he was facilitating that module himself. I had a dream in which he comes in, a very short dream, and he comes in and he says only one thing, right? And I just skip all of the settings and the containers for it because it would be half an hour conversation. He comes in and when I ask him, oh, can I offer you tea, anything, here you are with a guest in my dream. And he looks at me, he says one word. He says, mature. It's like shot through the heart. Next morning, it's like, Stan, what did you mean by that? And he, being one of the best teachers, he says, well, isn't it interesting? Yeah, I'm sure you'll figure it out. I'm sure you figure it out. So something to that extent, he said, and I continue to unfold that in one word. Could it be that one sentence, one word, one phrase, one sign, one vision, one insight, one embodied feeling, one intuitive vibe, it's all it takes for us to put one step forward, one foot forward, right? Just inching along. And that in and of itself is a heroic pursuit, because we will be in the initiatory weave as we always have been. Each of us, individually and collectively, we can fight those initiations as invitations into heroic quests, yes, or we can actually, some of them consider, hopefully all of them consider, and decide, I say yes to this one. And I say yes to this heroic quest. This is what Joseph Campbell talked about. This is what also Dr. Stanislav Grof understands very well. This is what Dr. Edward Mack understood very well, because he trained with Stan Grof in holotropic breathwork, and it actually created an opening for him. And you know how actually one of the first poignant moments where Dr. John Edward Mack realized that, there's something to it in terms of the UFO phenomenon was when Dr. Stanislav Grof, during training, holotropic breathwork training in the late 80s, gave a chapter from a new book that is called The Spiritual Emergency. It's a longer title, but Spiritual Emergencies. So gave a chapter from this book, and it was a chapter on the UFO phenomenon, written by no other than Keith Thompson, the same Keith Thompson who wrote Angels and Aliens, and the same Keith Thompson who wrote the UFO Paradox, right, most recently. And Dr. John Edward Mack kept wondering, why is Stan giving me this chapter on the UFO? And just as you mentioned synchronicities and other kind of weave and a web of consciousness, shortly thereafter, the experiencers came to find Dr. John Edward Mack, and shortly thereafter he started working with them. Do you see how each of us is playing a part?
Yes.
And Stan Grof played a part for Dr. John Edward Mack, not only by helping him to facilitate expanded states of consciousness, and again, without any entheogens, without any medicine, without any substances, right? It was just non-substance way. But all of a sudden, not only that, but here's a chapter. And Dr. Stanislav Grof had courage to do it. Could it be that he had to reach into his intuitive depth and actually go to the extent of finding it, or maybe reprinting it, or getting the book, or what have you, whatever it was, but gifting that chapter. And after that, also in 1990, Dr. John Edward Mack met Bud Hopkins. Finally. It was postponed, right? But finally, and it was full on.
That's so interesting.
So we are, we're perhaps maybe asked and again invited to consider every invitation for a heroic journey, a heroic quest. And there are many, and they're unending. Some of them we say yes to, some of them we say maybe, some of them thank you, come back later. And some of them are full yes. And we get to discern.
Yes, we do. That's awesome. I think it's a fantastic place to end conversation on there is, we all have our different journeys and just being open to it and where they will take us and being able to be brave and patient with ourselves.
Yes, and acknowledging that we're all in this together, and also that we belong. What are the chances, if you're listening to this conversation, what are the chances? Could it be that you're meant to be a part of this sharing, of this gathering that extends well beyond this moment in time? Could it be that you're also invited to explore your own depth? Could it be that you're also invited to join the cosmic community in ways unimaginable? And we all continue to work it out. Could it be?
I think so. Possibly. Well, thank you so much for being willing to sit down and talk with me about this. I will absolutely love all of your work. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. And it's great to finally meet you in person. So thank you so much
likewise.
for
Thank you, Daniel. It's a great pleasure to be here and to share together and to be continued.
Yes, to be continued. And for everyone, where can they find you, by the way?
Oh, yes. If you're interested in academic journeys, formal academic journeys, please consider taking a look at my profile at Saybrook University. This is a humanistic school, which is certainly one of several schools, contemporary schools, who honor exceptional human experiences and exceptional human experiencers. So you can find me on faculty profile at Saybrook. You can also find me at earthsetacademy.substack.com. And Earthset Academy is one word. Earthset Academy, one word. .substack.com. Yes, please join the growing community of Earthset Academy supporters in that conversation. The more the merrier, one conversation at a time.
Awesome. Thank you so much again. Really appreciate it. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Until then.
Bad Monkey.